The scorching Texas sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty main street of Cedar Ridge, a forgotten speck of civilization clinging to the edge of the vast prairie. It was August 1873, and the afternoon heat made the air shimmer like water over the packed dirt road. Mary Lou pressed herself against the rough wooden wall of Murphy's saloon, trying to disappear into the shadow as her father's slurred voice carried through the swinging doors. "I tell you, she's strong as an ox." Jake Thornton's words tumbled out between hiccups. "Been washing clothes since she could barely reach the washboard. Virgin pure, too. Never let no man near her." Mary Lou's stomach churned. She'd come to fetch him home again, as she did most afternoons when the whiskey got the better of him. But today felt different. There was something in his tone that made her skin crawl. "Jake, you're drunk as a skunk." Someone laughed. "What are you going on about?" "I need me a horse," her father continued, swaying slightly. "Good strong horse to work the claim. And I got something to trade that's worth more in gold to the right man." The saloon fell quiet except for the lazy buzz of flies and the creak of the ceiling fan. Mary Lou's heart began to race. She knew that tone, that desperate edge in his voice when the drink and debts had backed him into a corner. You ain't got nothing worth a good horse, Thornton." The barkeep said, "You drank away everything worth having months ago." "I got Mary Lou." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Mary Lou's knees nearly buckled. Through the gap in the doors, she saw her father lean forward conspiratorially. 18 years old, pretty as a picture, knows how to keep house, never been touched by a man, trade her services to someone needing a wife, better'n letting her waste away in this dust hole. The men in the saloon erupted in a mixture of laughter and disgust, but one voice cut through the din deep, steady, and cold as winter steel. "That's enough, Thornton." Samuel Hayes rose from his corner table, his weathered face set in hard lines. At 37, he cut an imposing figure, tall, broad-shouldered, with hands scarred from years of working cattle and breaking horses. His wife had died 3 winters back from yellow fever, leaving him alone on his sprawling ranch with nothing but cattle and ghosts for company. "Mind your own business, Hayes," Jake spat, though he shrank back slightly. Everyone knew Samuel Hayes wasn't a man to cross. "I am." Samuel's gray eyes were like flint. "You're talking about trading your daughter like livestock. That becomes every decent man's business." "She ain't your concern." "She is now." Samuel reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a leather pouch. "How much do you owe?" Jake's eyes gleamed with desperate greed. $50, but I need a horse too. Good one, for the claim." "Your claim's been dead for 2 years, and we all know it." Samuel's voice was flat. "But I'll make you a deal. I've got a mare strong, young, already broke, worth $80 easy. You can have her." "For what?" Jake's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "For your daughter." Mary Lou's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a cry. The saloon went dead silent. Samuel continued, his voice carrying clearly. "But let's be clear about this. Thornton, I'm not buying a woman. I'm buying her freedom from you. What happens after that is between her and the Lord." Jake's face went through several expressions: surprise, calculation, and finally, ugly triumph. "Deal," he said, extending his grimy hand. Samuel looked at it with disgust. "We'll do this proper. Written contract, witnessed." He turned to the barkeep. "Murphy, get paper." Mary Lou couldn't breathe. This couldn't be happening. She wasn't a horse to be bartered, a thing to be traded. But even as rage and humiliation burned through her, a small voice whispered that Samuel Hayes might be the only thing standing between her and something worse. She'd seen how the other men looked at her, heard their whispers. At least Hayes had never shown her anything but distant courtesy. "Mary Lou," her father's voice bellowed from inside. "Get in here, girl." On trembling legs, she pushed through the saloon doors. Every eye in the place turned to her. She kept her chin high, though shame burned in her cheeks. Her simple calico dress was clean but faded, mended in several places. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun. Though wisps had escaped in the heat, she was pretty in an understated way, not the flashy beauty of saloon girls, but with clear skin, honest brown eyes, and a stubborn set to her jaw. "There she is," Jake said, gesturing wildly. "Prime piece of womanhood. Tell 'em, Mary Lou, tell 'em you're pure as snow."
"Father, please,"
she whispered.
"You're drunk. Let's go home."
"Home?" He laughed bitterly.
"What home? The shack that's fallen apart. The empty larder, no girl, but mister. Hayes here just bought you a better life. You should be thanking me."
Mary Lou's eyes found Samuel's. He was watching her with an unreadable expression, but something in his gaze wasn't cruel or lustful. It was tired, as tired as she felt. "Miss Thornton," he said quietly, "I apologize for this spectacle. It wasn't my intention to cause you embarrassment."
"But you'll still take me in trade,"
she said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "I'll take you away from this," he corrected. "What happens after that? We'll figure it out." Murphy returned with paper and ink. Mary Lou watched in numb horror as her father signed her away like a bill of sale. Samuel wrote out the terms in his careful, educated hand, so at odds with his rough appearance. When he finished, he had 3 men witness it, then folded the paper and put it in his pocket. "The mare's in the stable," he told Jake. "Take her and go." Jake scrambled out, not even looking at his daughter. Mary Lou stood frozen, unsure what to do. The men in the saloon stared at her with expressions ranging from pity to speculation. "Miss Thornton," Samuel said, standing, "gather whatever belongings you have. I'll wait outside with the wagon." She swallowed hard.
"I don't have much."
"Then it won't take long." He placed his hat on his head and moved toward the door, then paused. "And Miss Thornton, hold your head up. You've done nothing to be ashamed of." He walked out, leaving Mary Lou standing in the middle of the saloon. Murphy, the barkeep, cleared his throat awkwardly. "There's worse men than Sam Hayes," he offered.
"Lost his wife, never remarried, keeps to himself, works hard.
You could do worse." "I didn't do anything," Mary Lou said quietly. "I was done to." She walked out of the saloon with as much dignity as she could muster. The walk to the shack she'd called home felt both endless and too short. She gathered her few possessions, 2 dresses, her mother's old shawl, a hairbrush, a small cloth bag containing her mother's wedding ring and a faded photograph. Everything fit into a single carpet bag. Her father was already gone with his new horse, not even waiting to say goodbye. Mary Lou stood in the doorway of the empty shack, looking at the place where she'd struggled to maintain some semblance of home, despite her father's drinking. The vegetable garden she'd tended was withering in the heat. The curtains she'd made from flour sacks hung limp in the windows. "Ready!" She turned to find Samuel Hayes standing by a well-maintained wagon pulled by 2 sturdy horses. He didn't rush her, just waited patiently while she locked the door. A useless gesture, but it felt important somehow. He helped her into the wagon with surprising gentleness, his calloused hand barely touching her elbow. As they rolled out of Cedar Ridge, Mary Lou didn't look back. Behind them, she could hear the whispers starting already. Jake Thornton's girl, traded for a horse. The shame burned deep, but stronger than shame was fear. She was heading into the unknown with a man she barely knew. A man who now owned her according to a piece of paper in his pocket. Samuel said nothing as they drove. The silence broken only by the creak of wagon wheels and the steady clop of hooves. The Hayes Ranch lay 5 miles outside town, isolated enough that she'd have nowhere to run even if she wanted to. As the familiar buildings of Cedar Ridge disappeared behind them and the vast Texas plain stretched endlessly ahead, Mary Lou gripped her small carpet bag and wondered if she'd simply traded one prison for another. But then she stole a glance at Samuel Hayes, his profile stern under the brim of his hat, his hands steady on the reins. He hadn't looked at her the way the other men in the saloon had. He'd said he was buying her freedom, not her. Maybe he meant it, or maybe men just said whatever they needed to say to get what they wanted. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the prairie in shades of gold and red, Mary Lou Thornton sat beside the man who had traded a horse for her life and wondered what price she would really have to pay. The Hayes ranch sprawled before them as the wagon crested the final hill, and Mary Lou caught her breath despite herself. The main house stood solid and respectable, built from good timber with a wraparound porch and real glass windows that caught the dying light. Beyond it stretched corrals, a massive barn, and several outbuildings, all speaking of prosperity and careful maintenance. This was no hardscrabble operation like her father's failed claim. Samuel pulled the wagon up to the front of the house and climbed down. Moving around to help her, Mary Lou hesitated before accepting his hand, noting how he immediately stepped back once her feet touched the ground, maintaining a careful distance. "Come on," he said simply, grabbing her carpet bag before she could protest. "I'll show you to your room. Your room, not his room, not our room." Mary Lou followed him up the porch steps, her worn boots clicking against boards that didn't creak or sag. Inside, the house smelled of leather and wood polish, with an underlying scent of emptiness that spoke of too few people in too much space. The front room was simply furnished but clean, a stone fireplace, leather chairs, a shelf of books that surprised her. Samuel led her down a hallway, past a closed door that must be his room, to a smaller room at the back of the house. It's been empty for a while," he said, setting her bag inside the door. "But it's clean. Fresh linens on the bed. There's water in the pitcher." Mary Lou stepped inside, taking in the iron bedstead with its quilted coverlet, a simple dresser with a mirror, a washstand, even a small writing desk by the window that looked out over the kitchen garden. It was nicer than any room she'd ever had. "Thank you," she managed. Samuel stood in the doorway, seeming to struggle with what to say. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Supper's usually at 6. Kitchen's down the hall. You don't have to cook if you don't want to. I manage fine on my own." "I can cook," Mary Lou said quickly, grasping at something familiar, something that might define her purpose here. "I'm good at it." He nodded slowly. "If you want to, but you're not. That's not why you're here." "Then why am I here, Mr. Hayes?" The question hung between them. Samuel removed his hat, running a hand through his dark hair streaked with premature gray. "I couldn't let him auction you off to the highest bidder," he said finally. "Or worse, just give you to whoever offered him a bottle. Jake Thornton's been heading down this road for a while. Today, he finally arrived." "So you bought me instead?" "I bought you from him," Samuel corrected, his gray eyes serious. "That doesn't mean I think I own you. Soon as you figure out what you want to do, where you want to go, I'll help you get there. Consider this a stopping place until you sort things out." Mary Lou searched his face for deception, for the catch that must surely come. Men didn't trade horses for women out of kindness, but his expression remained steady, tired, and somehow sad. "I should warn you," he continued. "Folks in town will talk. They'll make assumptions. Nothing I can do about that except keep my distance and try to protect your reputation best I can. You have your own room. I'll not enter it without permission. We'll work out the rest as we go." With that, he placed his hat back on his head and left her alone. Mary Lou sat on the edge of the bed, trying to make sense of it all. The mattress was soft, the room warm and secure. Through the window, she could see the last rays of sun painting the sky purple and gold. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed softly. She unpacked her few belongings, hanging her spare dresses in the wardrobe that dwarfed them. Her mother's shawl she spread across the foot of the bed. The photograph and ring she placed carefully in the top drawer of the dresser. By the time she finished, the smell of cooking drew her to the kitchen. Samuel stood at the stove, frying beef and potatoes with surprising competence. He glanced up when she entered, but said nothing, just pointed to where plates and silverware were kept. Mary Lou set the table for two, the domestic action both strange and familiar. They ate in silence at first, the only sounds the clink of forks against plates and the distant chirp of crickets. Finally, Mary Lou couldn't stand it anymore. "You said your wife died," she ventured. Samuel's hand stilled for a moment, then resumed cutting his beef. 3 years ago, yellow fever swept through, took her and a quarter of the town. "I'm sorry." "So am I." He took a drink of water. She made this place a home. Haven't quite figured out how to do that myself." Mary Lou looked around the kitchen, functional, clean, but lacking those small touches that spoke of care. No curtains on the windows, no flowers on the table, no warmth beyond what the stove provided. "You've done well enough," she offered. "I've survived," he corrected. "Not the same thing." After supper, she insisted on washing the dishes despite his protests. It felt good to have something to do with her hands, some way to earn her keep that didn't involve whatever dark thoughts the men in town were probably entertaining. The next days fell into an awkward rhythm. Samuel left early to work the ranch with his 2 hired hands, brothers named Tom and Will Crawford, who seemed as taciturn as their boss. Mary Lou threw herself into cooking and cleaning, partly from habit and partly to justify her presence. The house began to show small changes: wildflowers on the table, curtains fashioned from fabric she found in a trunk, the smell of fresh bread each morning. Samuel said little, but she caught him noticing. A slight pause when he saw the flowers, a small nod of appreciation at the hearty meals. He maintained careful boundaries, never touching her, rarely speaking beyond what was necessary. Yet there was a kindness in his distance, a respect she'd rarely experienced. On her 4th morning at the ranch, Mary Lou ventured out to the kitchen garden. It had been well planned but poorly maintained, vegetables struggling among the weeds. She tied back her hair, rolled up her sleeves, and set to work. "What are you doing?" She looked up to find Samuel watching her, his expression unreadable. "Weeding," she said simply. "These tomatoes are dying from lack of care." "That was Rebecca's garden," he said quietly. "Haven't had the heart to tend it proper." Mary Lou's hands stilled. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "No," he shook his head. "It's good. Gardens should be tended." She'd hate seeing it like this. He walked away. But an hour later, she found a better hoe leaning against the garden fence, and a pair of leather gloves that fit her hands perfectly sitting on top of a watering can. That evening, after another silent supper, Samuel surprised her by speaking. "You're not what I expected," he said. "What did you expect?" He considered this. "Tears. Maybe demands. Anger. You have every right to all of that." "Would it change anything?" "No." Mary Lou traced the wood grain of the table with her finger. "My mother used to say that when life gives you a burden, you can carry it with grace or let it crush you. The weight's the same either way." "Wise woman." "She was." Mary Lou looked up at him. "She died when I was 12. After that, it was just me trying to keep Papa from drowning in a bottle. I failed. That wasn't your job to succeed at." The simple statement, delivered without judgment, nearly undid her. She'd carried the weight of that failure for so long. She'd forgotten it wasn't supposed to be hers to bear. A week passed, then 2. The talk in town was everything Samuel had predicted and worse. When Mary Lou accompanied him for supplies, she heard the whispers, saw the looks. The Thornton girl. Traded for a horse. Living with Sam Hayes now. You know what that means. She kept her head high, as Samuel had told her that first day. But each word was a small cut. Mrs. Patterson, the minister's wife, actually crossed the street to avoid her. Men looked at her differently now, their gazes bold and speculative. Samuel noticed. Of course. On the ride home, he spoke suddenly. I could marry you. Mary Lou nearly fell off the wagon seat. What? It would stop the talk, make you respectable again. We could have it annulled later, when you're ready to leave. Just a legal formality. She stared at him. You'd do that tie yourself to me, even on paper, just to salvage my reputation. Your reputation's only damaged because of something I did, he said, eyes on the road. Seems only fair I help fix it.
By marrying me.
By giving you the protection of my name, that's all it would be. Nothing would change between us. Mary Lou considered this. Marriage to a man she barely knew, who'd bought her like livestock. But also marriage to a man who'd given her a room of her own, who left fresh vegetables from other parts of the ranch by the kitchen door for her garden, who treated her with unfailing respect. I'll think about it, she said finally. That night, she lay in her bed listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch, the creak of the windmill, the distant bawl of cattle, the howl of coyotes on the prairie. Her father had traded her for a horse. The town thought her ruined, and the man who'd bought her was offering marriage to protect a reputation she wasn't sure was worth protecting. Through the thin walls, she could hear Samuel moving around his room, the quiet sounds of a solitary man preparing for another solitary night. He was offering her a new kind of cage, perhaps, but one with an open door. For the first time since that awful day in the saloon, Mary Lou allowed herself to cry, not for what she'd lost, but for the strange, unexpected kindness of a man who bought her freedom with a horse and asked nothing in return but the chance to protect what little dignity she had left. In his room, Samuel sat on the edge of his bed, holding the small daguerreotype of Rebecca he kept in his bedside drawer. His wife smiled back at him, frozen forever in youth and happiness. I don't know what I'm doing, Becca, he whispered to the image. But I couldn't leave her to them. You understand that, don't you? The picture, of course, gave no answer. But somewhere in the silence, he thought he heard approval. Rebecca would have done the same thing, would have opened their home to a girl with nowhere else to go. She just would have done it with more grace than he could manage. He put the picture away and lay back, staring at the ceiling. In the morning, he'd check on that garden again, maybe help with the heavier work. It was good to see things growing there once more. The morning started like any other, with Mary Lou in the garden before the heat became unbearable. She'd transformed the neglected plot over the past 3 weeks, coaxing life from the dry soil with patience and care. The tomatoes were beginning to set fruit, and the beans climbed their poles with determination. She was bent over the squash plants, checking for pests, when she heard the thunder of hooves. A horse had broken loose from the corral, a young mare, eyes wild with panic, charging straight toward the garden. Mary Lou froze. The mare was massive, all muscle and momentum, close enough now that she could see the whites of its eyes. She threw up her hands instinctively, knowing it wouldn't help, bracing for impact. But it never came. Samuel appeared from nowhere, throwing himself between her and the horse, grabbing the mare's halter with practiced ease. The animal reared, front hooves pawing the air, but he held firm, speaking in low, calming tones until the mare settled, sides heaving. You hurt? He asked, not taking his eyes off the horse. Mary Lou found her voice. No, I'm fine. Tom Crawford came running up, face flushed. Sorry, boss, gate came unlatched. She spooked at something. Samuel handed over the lead rope. Check all the latches. Don't need this happening again. As Tom led the mare away, Samuel finally turned to Mary Lou. She was trembling now, reaction setting in. Without thinking, he reached out, his hands gentle on her arms, steadying her. You sure you're not hurt? Just scared. She managed a shaky laugh. I thought sure she was going to trample right through me. Wouldn't have let that happen. His thumbs moved slightly, an unconscious soothing motion against her skin. You're safe here. Mary Lou. Want you to know that. It was the first time he'd touched her since helping her from the wagon that first day. His hands were calloused but careful, treating her like something precious and breakable. Mary Lou looked up at him, seeing concern in those usually distant gray eyes, and something else, something that made her breath catch. Then he seemed to realize what he was doing. He dropped his hands and stepped back, clearing his throat. Should probably check those plants for damage, he said gruffly, and strode away. Mary Lou stood there, arm still tingling where he'd touched her. The garden suddenly felt too small, too exposed. She gathered her tools and fled to the house, trying to make sense of the warmth spreading through her chest. From the barn, Samuel watched her go, cursing himself for a fool. He'd maintained careful distance for weeks. And then, one moment of fear for her safety, and he'd thrown it all aside. The feel of her arms under his hands, the trust in her eyes when she'd looked up at him. It was everything he'd been trying to avoid. Boss, Tom, appeared at his elbow. Mare's settled. Want me to work with her this afternoon? I'll do it, Samuel said. Physical labor might drive away the memory of how right it had felt to hold Mary Lou, even for those few seconds. That evening, dinner was awkward. Mary Lou had made chicken and dumplings, one of his favorites, but could barely meet his eyes. Samuel concentrated on his plate like it held the secrets of the universe. Finally, she spoke. Thank you for this morning. Just glad you weren't hurt. I mean it. She set down her fork. You put yourself between me and danger without thinking. That's not something most would do for... She trailed off. For what? For a woman who was traded for a horse. The bitter words hung between them. Samuel looked up sharply. You're more than that. Am I? Mary Lou's voice was soft but steady. The whole town knows the story. Jake Thornton's daughter, bartered like goods. And now I'm here, in your house, cooking your meals, tending what was your wife's garden. What does that make me, Mr. Hayes? It makes you Mary Lou, he said firmly. A woman who survived more than most and kept her dignity intact, who's brought life back to a garden I'd let die and made this empty house feel less like a tomb. That's all I see when I look at you. She stared at him, tears threatening. You really mean that? I say what I mean. Your wife was lucky to have you. Now it was Samuel's turn to look away. I was the lucky one. Rebecca saw something in me worth loving. Never quite figured out what it was. I'm beginning to, Mary Lou said quietly, then flushed at her own boldness. The silence stretched. But it was different now, charged with possibility rather than awkwardness. Samuel cleared his throat. There's a church social next Sunday. Probably should show our faces. Let people see everything's proper here. Mary Lou's stomach clenched. They'll talk. They're already talking. Might as well give them something real to see, that you're a respectable woman deserving of respect. And if they don't see that, then they're blind. His voice was flat, matter of fact. You'll wear your best dress. I'll wear my Sunday suit, and we'll hold our heads high. Together. Together. The word sent an unexpected flutter through her. Sunday came too quickly. Mary Lou dressed carefully in her better dress, still simple, but clean and pressed. She'd sewn new ribbons onto her bonnet and polished her boots until they shone. When she emerged from her room, Samuel was waiting in a black suit that emphasized his broad shoulders. He'd shaved closely and combed his hair back. You look... He paused, seeming to search for words. Very nice. Thank you. She smoothed her skirt nervously. You clean up well yourself. He offered his arm, formal and proper. Shall we? The ride to town was quiet, but Samuel kept stealing glances at her, in the morning sunlight, with wisps of hair escaping from her bonnet. She looked young and lovely and utterly out of place beside a rough rancher old enough to have lived a whole life without her. The church was full when they arrived. Conversation stopped mid-sentence as they entered, every eye turning to track their progress. Mary Lou's fingers tightened on Samuel's arm. "Steady," he murmured. "Remember, heads high." They found a pew near the back. Whispers followed them like rustling leaves. Mary Lou kept her eyes forward, but she could feel the weight of judgment pressing down. Mrs. Patterson's fan fluttered disapprovingly. Young ladies leaned together behind gloved hands. Men's gazes lingered too long. Reverend Carlyle delivered a sermon on Mary Magdalene that felt pointed, though he never looked their way directly. Mary Lou's cheeks burned, but Samuel sat steady as a rock beside her, his presence oddly comforting. After the service, most folks headed to the field beside the church where tables groaned under the weight of covered dishes and pies. Mary Lou had baked an apple pie with fruit from a tree behind the ranch house, carrying it like a shield. Well, Mrs. Alcott, the banker's wife, approached with a smile sharp as broken glass. "Miss Thornton, how unexpected to see you here."
Mrs. Alcott, Mary Lou managed a nod. "And with Mr. Hayes, my, the whole town's been wondering about your arrangement." Samuel stepped closer, not quite touching Mary Lou, but clearly claiming his place beside her. "Miss Thornton is a guest at my ranch. Mrs. Alcott, helping with the household until she decides her next step." "Of course." The woman's tone suggested she believed nothing of the sort. Still, a young unmarried woman, living with a widower. Well, I'm sure you can understand why people might wonder.
"People might do better minding their own business," Samuel said calmly.
Mrs. Alcott's face flushed.
"Well, I never—" "No," Samuel agreed.
"You never, that's the problem."
He guided Mary Lou away, leaving the banker's wife sputtering, but the damage was done. Everywhere they turned, conversations died. Women pulled their skirts aside as Mary Lou passed. She tried to act normal, to sample food and compliment the cooks, but each interaction felt forced.
"I need some air,"
she whispered. Samuel nodded. They walked away from the crowd, finding a spot under a large oak tree. Mary Lou leaned against the trunk, fighting tears. "I'm sorry," Samuel said quietly. "This was a mistake."
"No."
She straightened, chin lifting. "They want to see me broken. I won't give them the satisfaction." Something flashed in his eyes. Admiration, perhaps, or recognition. "You're stronger than you know." "I'm tired of being strong." The admission slipped out before she could stop it. "Just once, I'd like to be seen as something other than Jake Thornton's daughter or that girl who was traded for a horse. I see you as more—" The simple statement, delivered in his steady voice, nearly undid her. Mary Lou looked up at him, this quiet man who'd offered her shelter without demands, who'd stood between her and a panicked horse, who faced down the town's judgment beside her.
"Sometimes,"
she said softly,
"the way you look at me, it's like your hands this morning in the garden, like I'm something precious."
Samuel's breath caught. "Mary Lou, is that wrong to want to be touched with kindness instead of ownership?" He moved closer, drawn despite himself. "It's not wrong, but I can't offer you what you deserve. I'm a used-up widower with more past than future. You should have a young man, someone who can give you a proper life." "What if I don't want a young man?" The words tumbled out, brave and terrifying. "What if I want someone who knows the weight of loss, who understands that some broken things can't be fixed but can still be beautiful?" Samuel's hand rose slowly, carefully, to touch her cheek. His thumb brushed away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "You are beautiful," he said roughly. "And you deserve better than what this town thinks of you. Better than what I can give you. Let me decide what I deserve." They stood there under the oak tree, his hand gentle against her face. The judgment of the town temporarily forgotten. It wasn't a declaration of love or a passionate embrace. It was quieter than that, deeper. It was recognition. One scarred soul seeing another clearly. "I'm Mr. Hayes, Miss Thornton." They jerked apart to find young Timothy Carlyle, the Reverend's son, running toward them. "Pa wants to know if you're staying for the pie contest," the boy said, oblivious to what he'd interrupted. Samuel dropped his hand. The moment broken. "Tell him we'll be along directly." As the boy ran off, Mary Lou touched her cheek where his hand had been. "We should go back." "We could leave. Right now. Let them gossip over their pie." She smiled slightly. "No. I want to see who wins the contest. Besides, my apple pie is entered. Wouldn't be fair to abandon it." "Your pie could win." "Oh, Mrs. Patterson has won 7 years running. Her reign of terror might be ending." "Despite everything?" Mary Lou laughed. "Come on, then. Let's face the dragons." They walked back together, closer than before, but not touching. The crowd still whispered, still stared. But something had shifted. Mary Lou held her head higher, and Samuel's presence beside her felt less like protection and more like partnership. The pie contest results were announced as the sun began to sink low, when Reverend Carlyle called out, "Miss Mary Lou Thornton for her apple pie." The shock on faces was almost worth the earlier humiliation. "Seems your reign has ended, Mrs. Patterson," Samuel said mildly as Mary Lou accepted her blue ribbon. The ride home was different. The ribbon rested in Mary Lou's lap, tangible proof that she was more than her father's bargaining chip. Samuel drove with one hand, the other resting on the seat between them, not touching, but close enough that she could feel the warmth. "Thank you," she said as the ranch came into view. "For today, for standing with me." "Always will," he said simply. "Long as you need me to." And there it was, the promise of something neither had expected to find. Not love, not yet, but possibility, growing like the plants in Rebecca's garden, tended by gentle hands and patient hearts. The trouble started on a sweltering Tuesday afternoon. Mary Lou was at the general store, carefully selecting fabric for new kitchen curtains, when she heard the rough voices outside. Through the window, she glimpsed 3 trail-worn cowboys tying their horses to the hitching post, dust still settling around them like smoke. "That's the Hayes place," one was saying. "Heard he's got himself a pretty little thing keeping house now." "The Thornton girl," another added with a laugh that made Mary Lou's skin crawl. "Traded for a horse. They say, wonder what else she'd trade for." Her hands trembled as she set down the bolt of blue calico. Mr. Morrison, the shopkeeper, had heard too. His face flushed with embarrassment as he busied himself with his ledger, pretending not to notice. Mary Lou forced herself to continue shopping, but the cowboys entered the store, bringing with them the smell of trail dust and whiskey. They were young, probably not much older than her, but their eyes held the hardness of men who'd been too long without civilized company. Well, the tallest one said, removing his hat with exaggerated courtesy. "You must be Miss Thornton." Mary Lou kept her eyes on the fabric. "Excuse me, I need to finish my shopping." "No hurry, darlin'." He moved closer, his friends flanking him. "Hey, name's Buck Williams. These here are my partners, Jesse and Cole. We've been hearing stories about you all the way from Amarillo." "Then you've been listening to gossip that's no concern of yours." She tried to move past, but Buck stepped into her path. "Gossip says Sam Hayes bought you fair and square, but seems to me, if a woman can be bought once." He let the implication hang in the air like a threat. "Please move aside." Mary Lou's voice stayed steady though her heart raced. "What's your hurry? Old Sam can't be that exciting. Man his age, widow and all. Bet you're looking for something more lively." Jesse laughed. "Buck's got a point.
Why settle for one owner when you could have options? The word owner hit like a slap. Mary Lou's chin lifted. Mr. Hayes doesn't own me. No one does. That's not what we heard. Cole spoke up, younger than the others, but trying to match their swagger. Heard your daddy traded you straight up. Makes you property, don't it? Makes her available. Buck corrected, reaching out to finger the fabric of her sleeve. Question is, what's the going rate these days? Mary Lou jerked away, but Buck grabbed her wrist. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to show he could. Don't be unfriendly now. We got money, more than enough to make it worth your while. Let go of me. Or what you'll tell Hayes man who buys a woman can't complain when others want a bid. The bell over the door chimed violently as it slammed open. Samuel stood in the doorway, his face carved from granite. He took in the scene. Buck holding Mary Lou's wrist, his friends surrounding her pale face in one sweeping glance. Take your hand off her. His voice was quiet, which somehow made it more menacing. Buck released Mary Lou but didn't back away. Just having a friendly conversation with the lady. Hayes. That's Miss Thornton to you, and she doesn't look like she's enjoying your conversation. Miss Thornton? Buck's smile was ugly. Funny way to address property you bought. Samuel moved into the store with the controlled grace of a man who'd faced down predators before. You boys are new to these parts, so I'll explain once. Miss Thornton is under my protection. That means you treat her with the same respect you'd show any lady. More, because she's earned it. Respect, Jesse scoffed. For Jake Thornton's girl, the whole territory knows. Samuel's fist connected with Jesse's jaw before he could finish. The cowboy crashed into a display of canned goods, sending them rolling across the floor. Buck and Cole reached for their guns, but Samuel already had his Colt drawn and steady. Mr. Morrison, Samuel said calmly, never taking his eyes off the cowboys. You might want to step into your back room. The shopkeeper scurried away. Mary Lou pressed against the counter, watching wide-eyed as Jesse struggled to his feet, blood streaming from his nose. You broke my nose. Be grateful that's all I broke. Samuel's gun didn't waver. Now, you boys are going to apologize to Miss Thornton. Then you're going to get on your horses and ride out. Don't stop until you hit the next county. You can't. I can. Samuel cocked the hammer. I will. Your choice whether you leave vertical or horizontal. Buck's bravado crumbled. Sorry, miss, he muttered. Louder. Sorry, Miss Thornton. Buck's face was red with humiliation. Didn't mean no disrespect. Jesse Cole. Both cowboys mumbled apologies. Samuel kept his gun trained on them as they backed toward the door. One more thing, he said. You spread the word. Anyone else comes around thinking Mary Lou Thornton is available for trade, rent, or purchase will answer to me, and I won't be as gentle next time. They fled, and Mary Lou heard their horses thundering away moments later. Samuel holstered his gun and turned to her, his face softening with concern. You hurt. She shook her head, not trusting her voice. The trembling she'd held at bay now shook her whole body. Without thinking, she moved toward him, and he opened his arms, gathering her against his chest. It's all right, he murmured. You're safe. Mary Lou pressed her face against his shirt, breathing in the scent of leather and soap and something uniquely him. His arms were strong and sure around her, one hand gently stroking her back. They said, they called me. She couldn't finish. They were wrong. His voice rumbled through his chest. Every word they said was wrong. Mr. Morrison crept back out, surveying the damage. I'll clean this up. Sam, no charge for whatever the lady was buying. Samuel nodded, keeping one arm around Mary Lou as he guided her from the store. He helped her into the wagon, then climbed up beside her. Instead of taking the reins immediately, he turned to face her. This is my fault, he said. I should have known there'd be men who'd hear the story and think, I should have protected you better. You did protect me. Mary Lou's voice was small but certain. You came.
I'll always come. The fierce promise in his words made her look up. His gray eyes burned with an intensity she'd never seen before. Anyone who threatens you, who disrespects you, who makes you feel less than the lady you are, they'll answer to me.
Why? The question slipped out. Why do you care so much?
Samuel's hand rose to cup her cheek, his touch infinitely gentle. Because somewhere between that first day and now, you became important, more important than I have words for. Mary Lou leaned into his touch, her own hand covering his. Samuel. It was the first time she'd used his given name.
I know I said nothing would change between us, that I'd keep my distance, but I can't stand seeing you hurt. Can't stand the thought of anyone treating you as less than precious.
Then don't keep your distance anymore. The words hung between them. An invitation and a plea. Samuel searched her face, looking for doubt, for fear, for anything that said she didn't mean it, finding none. He slowly leaned closer. The kiss was careful, questioning. A man who'd forgotten gentleness, remembering how it felt. Mary Lou's lips were soft under his, her small sigh of acceptance nearly his undoing. When they parted, her eyes were bright with unshed tears.
I'm not Rebecca,
she whispered. No, his thumb stroked her cheekbone. You're Mary Lou, and that's who I'm falling for. The ride home was quiet, but it was a different silence than before, warm and full of possibility. Samuel drove one-handed, his other hand holding Mary Lou's, their fingers intertwined on the seat between them. Back at the ranch, Tom Crawford was waiting on the porch, his face grim. Boss, we got trouble. Those 3 cowboys you ran off, they stopped by Murphy's saloon, shooting their mouths off, saying things about Miss Mary Lou that ain't repeatable. Murphy threw them out, but word spreading. Samuel's jaw tightened. How bad? Bad enough. Few of the ranch hands from the Bar J were talking about riding over here, checking on Miss Thornton themselves. Mary Lou felt the blood drain from her face. It was starting, the consequences of her father's actions, of the town's judgment, spreading like wildfire across the territory. Tom, you and Will take turns on watch tonight. Samuel ordered. Anyone rides up who doesn't belong, fire a warning shot. Yes, sir. As Tom headed to the bunkhouse, Samuel turned to Mary Lou. Pack your things. Her heart sank. You're sending me away. What, no? He grasped her shoulders gently. I'm marrying you. Tomorrow. If Reverend Carlyle will do it. Should have done it weeks ago. Samuel, you don't have to. Yes, I do. His voice was firm. Not because of them. Not to save your reputation or stop their filthy talk. But because the thought of you leaving, of not having the right to protect you, to stand beside you, I can't bear it. Mary Lou searched his face. Is that a proposal? Despite everything, a small smile tugged at his lips. Not much of one. I admit, you deserve flowers and pretty words. But all I have is the truth. I want you as my wife. Not because you need protection, but because I need you. This house has been empty since Rebecca died. But you've made it home again. You've made me feel alive again. I was traded for a horse, she said softly. That's how this started. How can you want... Samuel silenced her with another kiss, deeper this time, full of promise. How it started doesn't matter. Only how we choose to continue. He pulled back, framing her face with his hands. Choose me, Mary Lou. Choose us. Looking into his eyes. Seeing the sincerity there. The devotion, the promise of a future she'd never dared imagine. Mary Lou made her choice. Yes. The word was simple, but it changed everything. Samuel smiled, a real smile that transformed his weathered face, and kissed her again. Whatever storms were coming, whatever judgment the world wanted to heap on them, they'd face it together. That night, with Tom Crawford keeping watch and her few belongings already moved into Samuel's room in anticipation of tomorrow's wedding. Mary Lou stood at her window looking out at the garden. In the moonlight, she could see the plants she'd tended, growing strong despite the harsh soil. She wasn't Jake Thornton's traded daughter anymore. Tomorrow, she'd be Mary Lou Hayes, chosen, cherished, and protected by a man who saw her worth when the rest of the world saw only scandal. It wasn't the life she'd planned, but sometimes the best gifts came in unexpected packages. The wedding was simple and quick, performed in Reverend Carlisle's parlor with only Tom and Will Crawford as witnesses. Mary Lou wore her mother's shawl over her best dress, and Samuel had shaved so closely he'd nicked his jaw. When he said, "I do," his voice was steady and sure. When she repeated the vows, her hands trembled only slightly. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Carlisle said, and Samuel did, gently, respectfully, but with a promise of more. They were married. Just like that, Mary Lou Thornton became Mary Lou Hayes, and the fragile understanding between them deepened into something more binding than paper or words. The first weeks of marriage were a delicate dance of adjustment. Samuel moved her belongings into the main bedroom, but maintained a careful courtesy, letting her set the pace of their intimacy. They shared the bed like polite strangers at first, a rolled blanket between them that neither acknowledged but both respected. But slowly, naturally, the barriers began to fall, a hand reaching across the divide to offer comfort after nightmares, waking to find they'd moved together in sleep, her head on his shoulder, his arm protective around her. Small touches throughout the day, his hand on her back as he passed, her fingers brushing his when she handed him coffee. One evening, 3 weeks after their wedding, Mary Lou was preserving the last of the summer vegetables. The kitchen was steamy and hot, her hair curling damply around her face as she stirred the pot of tomatoes. "Smells good in here," Samuel said from the doorway. "It'll taste better in winter when we're eating stew," she replied, not looking up. "Could you hand me those jars from the high shelf?" He moved behind her to reach up, and for a moment they were pressed close, his chest against her back. Mary Lou's breath caught. Instead of moving away immediately, Samuel stayed there, his hands coming to rest lightly on her waist. "Mary Lou," he said softly. She turned in his arms, the spoon dripping forgotten in her hand. His eyes were dark, questioning. In answer, she reached up to touch his face, tracing the line of his jaw. "I know about Rebecca," she said quietly. "I know you loved her. I'm not asking you to forget." "I don't want to forget her," Samuel admitted. "But I don't want to live in the past anymore either. These weeks with you, I feel like I'm waking up after a long sleep." "I feel the same." She set down the spoon and placed both hands on his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong under her palms. "I never expected this. Never expected you." He lowered his head slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. The kiss was different from their others, deeper, hungrier, full of weeks of careful restraint finally breaking. When they parted, both were breathing hard. "The tomatoes," Mary Lou said weakly. "Let them burn," Samuel growled, and kissed her again. They didn't let them burn. Mary Lou was too practical for that, but something fundamental shifted that night. The rolled blanket disappeared. They moved together like two people learning a new dance, sometimes stepping on toes, sometimes finding perfect rhythm. Samuel was patient and gentle, treating her like spun glass until she told him firmly that she wouldn't break. "I'm stronger than I look," she reminded him. "I know," he said, wonder in his voice. "Strongest woman I ever met." They settled into a routine that felt both new and timeless. Samuel taught her to ride properly, not just perch on a horse, but really ride. Mary Lou expanded the garden, adding herbs and flowers. They worked side by side, talked over meals, sat together in the evenings while she mended and he went over the ranch books. One afternoon, Samuel came home to find Mary Lou in the garden, laughing with Tom Crawford over some joke. The sound stopped him in his tracks. He realized he'd never heard her truly laugh before, not the polite chuckle she used in town, but real, delighted laughter that made her whole face light up. "What's so funny?" he asked. Approaching them, Mary Lou turned, still smiling. "Tom was telling me about the time you tried to break that Mustang and ended up in the water trough." "3 times, Tom added with a grin. "Boss was stubborn as the horse." "More stubborn," Samuel corrected. "I won, didn't I? After half the county had seen you dripping wet and madder than a wet cat." Tom said, "Will's still got that sketch he drew." "Will drew that." Samuel's eyes narrowed. "He told me young Eddie Parsons did it." Tom's grin widened. "Better go have a talk with Will, boss." As Tom sauntered off, Samuel shook his head. "Those 2 will be the death of me." "They adore you," Mary Lou said, slipping her arm through his. "It's obvious. They work for me." "They stay with you," she corrected. "There's a difference. They could work anywhere, but they choose here, just like I do." Samuel looked down at her. This woman who'd transformed his life so unexpectedly. "Still can't figure why you choose this place. Choose me." "Because you see me," she said simply. "Not Jake Thornton's daughter, not the girl traded for a horse, not damaged goods. Just me." "You're everything," he said roughly, pulling her close. But their newfound happiness couldn't shield them from the outside world forever. It started with small things. Orders Samuel had placed with suppliers were mysteriously delayed or canceled. Neighbors who'd been friendly became distant. The minister's wife crossed the street to avoid greeting Mary Lou in town. Then came the letter. Samuel found it nailed to the gatepost one morning, the message scrawled in barely literate writing. "Hayes, your wife ain't nothing but a whore. Everybody knows it. You can dress her up and marry her, but she's still trash. Better men than you want to turn. Watch your back." He tore it down before Mary Lou could see it, but she noticed his increased vigilance, the way he started wearing his gun even for simple chores, how Tom or Will always seemed to be nearby when she was outside. "What aren't you telling me?" she asked one evening as he checked the locks for the 3rd time. "Nothing for you to worry about." "Samuel Hayes, I'm your wife. Your worries are mine." He sighed, sinking into his chair. "Some folks can't let the past be. They're making noise." "About me. About us. About things that aren't their business." He rubbed his face tiredly. "I've handled worse. It'll blow over." But it didn't blow over. The harassment escalated. Someone poisoned one of their wells. Fence lines were cut, letting cattle stray. One morning they woke to find whore painted across the barn in white paint. Mary Lou stood looking at it, her face pale but composed. "I'll get the paint to cover it." "Tom and Will can—" "No," her voice was firm. "This is aimed at me. I'll handle it." She spent the morning painting over the ugly word, each brushstroke an act of defiance. Samuel worked alongside her, and they turned the wall into something beautiful, a mural of wildflowers like those in her garden. "There," she said, stepping back to admire their work. "Now it's art." Samuel pulled her close, kissed her paint-speckled nose. "You're remarkable." "I'm tired," she admitted, leaning against him. "Tired of being judged for something I didn't choose. Tired of paying for my father's sins." "Then we leave," Samuel said suddenly. "Sell the ranch. Go somewhere new. California. Maybe Oregon. Somewhere nobody knows our story." Mary Lou pulled back to look at him. "You do that, leave your home. Rebecca's grave. Everything." "You're my home now," he said simply. "Everything else is just land and cattle." She touched his face, this good man who'd chosen her against all reason. "No, this is our place. We built something here. I won't let them drive us away." Then we stay and fight. Together. Always together. That night, as rain drummed on the roof and Samuel held her close, Mary Lou told him about her childhood, about her mother, who'd tried so hard to hold things together, about watching her father's slow descent into the bottle, about the dreams she'd had as a girl, simple dreams of a home, a garden, someone to love her. "Never imagined it would happen like this," she said softly. "Being traded away like property, I thought my life was over that day." "Maybe it was," Samuel said thoughtfully. "The life you had, anyway, but look what grew from those ashes." She shifted to look up at him. "You really don't regret it taking on another man's cast-off?" "Don't." His voice was sharp. "Don't you dare talk about yourself that way. You're not anyone's cast-off. You're the woman who brought my dead heart back to life, who made this empty house a home, who stands beside me no matter what comes." "I love you," she whispered, the words coming unbidden but true. Samuel went very still. It was the first time either had said it, though the feeling had been growing between them like her garden plants, steady, strong, undeniable. "Say it again," he commanded softly. "I love you, Samuel Hayes." He rolled her beneath him, his eyes intense in the lamplight. "I love you too, Mary Lou Hayes, more than I thought possible, more than makes sense." They came together then with a passion that surprised them both. Not the careful joining of their early marriage, or even the growing comfort of recent weeks, but something deeper, fiercer. Two souls recognizing their match, claiming each other against all odds and opposition. Later, as Mary Lou drowsed against his chest, Samuel stared at the ceiling and made his plans. He wouldn't let anyone hurt her again. The town could gossip, strangers could judge, but anyone who threatened his wife would learn that Samuel Hayes protected what was his. And Mary Lou was his, just as surely as he was hers, not through purchase or trade, but through choice, the choice to see past surfaces to truth, to build love from unlikely foundations, to stand together against whatever storms might come. Outside, the rain continued, washing the land clean for tomorrow's growth. Inside, husband and wife held each other close, their hearts beating in rhythm, their breathing synchronized in sleep. The girl traded for a horse was gone. In her place was a woman who'd found her worth, her strength, and her heart's home in the most unexpected of places. The pounding on the door came just after dawn, violent enough to rattle the windows. Samuel was out of bed and reaching for his gun before Mary Lou even fully woke. "Stay here," he commanded, pulling on his pants. "Samuel." "Stay here." He checked the cylinder of his Colt and moved toward the front of the house. Mary Lou grabbed her wrapper and followed anyway, hovering in the hallway as Samuel approached the door. "Open up, Hayes." The voice was slurred but familiar. "I know she's in there." "Jake Thornton." Mary Lou's stomach clenched. Samuel unbolted the door but kept the chain on, opening it just enough to see out. "Thornton, you're drunk." "Want my daughter back." Jake swayed on the porch, looking worse than ever. His clothes were filthy, his face gaunt with hard living. "Changed my mind about our deal." "There's no changing. You signed papers." "Papers," Jake spat. "What's papers between men? Want her back? Got a better offer now." Samuel's voice went deadly quiet. "What offer?" "Man named Garrison. Runs cattle down Laredo way. Says he'll give me $100 for her. Cash money, that's more'n fair." Mary Lou pressed her hand to her mouth, fighting nausea. Even now, even after everything, her father saw her as goods to be bartered. "She's my wife," Samuel said flatly. "Legal and proper. You've got no claim." "She's my blood." Jake's voice rose to a shout. "My property till I say otherwise. You can't just keep her." "Watch me. I'll go to the law, tell 'em you forced her, stole her from me." "You do that," Samuel said calmly. "Tell them how you traded your daughter for a horse in front of witnesses. Tell them how you signed papers. See how that goes for you." Jake's face went ugly. "You think you're better'n me? Hayes high and mighty with your big ranch, you bought her same as anyone would. Difference is, I'm her kin, got rights." The door slammed shut in his face. Samuel threw the bolt and turned to find Mary Lou in the hallway, pale but steady. "Pack what you can carry," he said. "We're going to town." Samuel. He'll be back, and he won't be alone. Men like Garrison don't take no for an answer. He pulled her into his arms briefly. "I won't risk you. We'll stay at the hotel until this is sorted." But Jake wasn't done. As they loaded the wagon an hour later, they could hear him down at the bunkhouse, trying to rile up the hands. $50 to any man helps me get my daughter back," he was shouting. "100 if you bring her to me quiet-like." Tom Crawford's response carried clearly. "Mr. Thornton, I suggest you get off this property before I help you along with my boot." "You'll be sorry," Jake yelled. "All of you. When Garrison gets here with his men, you'll see. He's got legal papers. Says she was promised to him first." Mary Lou froze. "Promised?" Samuel's jaw tightened. "Get in the wagon." The ride to town was tense, Samuel constantly checking behind them. Mary Lou clutched the small bag containing her mother's ring and photograph, the only irreplaceable thing she owned. "He can't really take me, can he?" she asked quietly. "We're married. That has to mean something." "It means everything," Samuel assured her. "But men like Garrison don't always respect the law. Better to be somewhere public until we can sort this out." The hotel clerk looked surprised to see them, but gave them a room without comment. Samuel immediately went to find Sheriff Watson while Mary Lou waited, pacing the small space like a caged animal. He returned an hour later, his face grim. "Sheriff's out of town. Deputy says he can't do anything unless a crime's been committed." "So we wait." "We prepare." He sat on the bed, pulling her down beside him. "Tell me about this Garrison. Your father ever mentioned him before?" Mary Lou searched her memory. "Maybe there was a man came by about a year ago. Father was trying to arrange business. I stayed out of sight, but I heard them talking, something about father owing money." "And using you as collateral." The words hung ugly in the air. Mary Lou wrapped her arms around herself. "I thought when you married me, it would be over, that I'd finally be free of being treated like property." Samuel's voice was rough. "I know, and you are free, I swear to you. Nobody's taking you anywhere." A knock at the door made them both tense. Samuel positioned himself between Mary Lou and the entrance. "Who is it?" "Tom Crawford, boss, got news." Samuel let him in. Tom's face was serious. "Jake Thornton's at Murphy's, buying drinks with money he got somewhere. He's got 3 men with him. Strangers, hard-looking bunch." "Garrison!" "One of 'em matches the description you gave. Big man. Scar on his left cheek. Fancy Mexican spurs." Samuel cursed under his breath. "How many hands we got at the ranch?" "4, counting me and Will. But boss—" Tom hesitated. "These ain't regular cowboys. Look more like border trash. The kind that'll shoot a man for his boots." "Get the men into town," Samuel decided. "Quietly. Have them spread out but stay close. If Garrison wants to make this a fight, we'll be ready." After Tom left, Mary Lou touched Samuel's arm. "This is because of me. Maybe I should—" "Don't!" He gripped her shoulders. "Don't you dare say you should go with them. You're my wife. That means something to me even if it doesn't to them. But people could get hurt. You could get hurt. Rather die than let them take you." The simple statement was delivered as fact, not drama. "But it won't come to that. We'll handle this legal and proper, and if that doesn't work—" He checked his gun again. "Well, there's more than one kind of law out here." That evening, Samuel took Mary Lou to dinner in the hotel restaurant, making sure they were visible, establishing their presence publicly. Several townspeople nodded to them. Though conversations died as they passed, the story was spreading like wildfire. Jake Thornton back to reclaim his daughter. Strangers in town. Trouble brewing. They were halfway through their meal when Jake stumbled in, flanked by 3 men who moved with the dangerous grace of predators. The largest had to be Garrison Broad-Shoulders, expensive clothes that didn't quite hide the gun on his hip, a scar that turned his smile into a sneer.
There she is,
Jake pointed with a shaking finger.
my daughter, my blood.
The restaurant went silent. Garrison approached their table with lazy confidence. Mrs. Hayes, I presume? Or should I say, Miss Thornton? Your father and I have been discussing your situation. My situation is that I'm a married woman having dinner with my husband, Mary Lou said steadily. I don't believe we've been introduced. Mr.
Garrison, Luther Garrison.
He pulled out a chair uninvited and sat. I've come a long way based on your father's promises. Seems he offered you to me over a year ago, in exchange for certain debts I'm here to collect. Any arrangement you had with Jake Thornton became void when he traded her to me, Samuel said coldly. And certainly when she became my wife. Ah, but you see, I have papers. Garrison produced a folded document, signed by Jake here, promising me his daughter's hand in marriage in lieu of $500 he owed me. Dated well before your arrangement. That paper's worthless, Samuel said. You can't promise what you don't own, and Jake Thornton never owned his daughter. Didn't he? Garrison's smile was unpleasant. Seems the whole town knows he traded her for a horse. If he could do that, surely my prior claim takes precedence. Mary Lou found her voice. I'm not a piece of land to be claimed. Mr. Garrison, I'm a person, a married woman. Whatever paper you have means nothing. Spirited, Garrison noted appreciatively. I like that. You'll do well at my ranch down in Mexico. Amazing what's legal down there that isn't here. Samuel started to rise, but Mary Lou caught his arm. Around the restaurant, she could see Tom and Will positioned strategically, hands near their weapons. Other diners were frozen, watching the drama unfold. Mr. Garrison, she said clearly, making sure her voice carried. Are you suggesting you intend to kidnap a married woman in front of all these witnesses? Kidnap Garrison spread his hands. I'm simply collecting what was promised to me. Your father owes me a debt. You're the payment he offered. I am not payment, Mary Lou stood, trembling with rage. I am not property. I am not something to be traded or sold or promised. I am Mary Lou Hayes, wife of Samuel Hayes, and I will go nowhere with you or anyone else. Her voice rang through the restaurant. Several women at nearby tables nodded approval. Reverend Carlyle stood up from his corner table. Mr. Garrison, the Reverend said, I performed the marriage ceremony myself. Before God and law, Mrs. Hayes is a married woman. Whatever claim you think you have is invalid. Stay out of this, preacher, one of Garrison's men growled. I will not, Reverend Carlyle replied firmly. This is a matter of what's legal and what's right, and threatening a married woman in my town is neither. Your town, Garrison stood slowly. Last I checked, this was still free territory. Man can pursue his legal claims. And a man can defend his wife, Samuel said, standing as well. You want to pursue this, Garrison, fine, but you'll do it in court, proper-like, not by strong-arming folks in restaurants. Courts take time. I'm not a patient man. Then you'll learn to be, Sheriff Watson said from the doorway. The lawman had returned early, drawn by reports of trouble. Mr. Garrison, I'm going to have to ask you and your men to move along. We ain't breaking any laws, Sheriff. Harassment's a law. Disturbing the peace is a law. And if you keep pushing, I'll find a few more. Watson's hand rested on his gun. Now, you can pursue whatever legal channels you want come morning. But tonight, you'll leave these folks to finish their dinner in peace. Garrison locked eyes with Samuel for a long moment. This isn't over. No, Samuel agreed. It's not. After they left, the restaurant erupted in whispers. Samuel threw money on the table and guided Mary Lou out, back to their room. Once inside, she collapsed on the bed, shaking.
"He means to take me," she said, "one way or another. He means to take me to Mexico. Over my dead body. That's what I'm afraid of."
She looked up at him, tears streaming.
"Samuel, maybe I should—"
He kissed her fiercely, cutting off the words. "You're mine," he said against her lips. "Not his, not your father's, not anyone's but mine, and I protect what's mine."
"Yours,"
she agreed, clinging to him.
"Always yours."
They held each other as night fell, both knowing that tomorrow would bring a reckoning. Jake Thornton had returned not as a father seeking his daughter, but as a vulture seeking profit. And Luther Garrison was the kind of man who took what he wanted, law or no law. But Samuel Hayes was the kind of man who stood his ground, and Mary Lou was no longer the frightened girl who'd been traded for a horse. She was a woman who'd found her strength, her voice, and her home. Whatever came next, they'd face it as they'd learned to face everything, together. The showdown came at dawn. Samuel had barely slept, keeping watch at the window while Mary Lou dozed fitfully. When the first pale light touched the horizon, he saw them 5 riders approaching down the main street. Jake Thornton weaving in his saddle, Garrison and his men riding with purpose. "Mary Lou," he said quietly.
"They're coming."
She was up instantly, already dressed. They'd both slept in their clothes, knowing this moment would arrive. Samuel checked his gun one final time, then turned to his wife. "Whatever happens, you stay behind me. If things go bad, you run to the sheriff's office. Tom's already there. I'm not leaving you."
"You will if I tell you to."
He gripped her shoulders. "Promise me." Before she could answer, the pounding came at the door. "Hayes, open up time to settle this like men." Samuel moved to the door, Mary Lou close behind despite his warning. The hotel hallway was narrow, advantage to the defender. He opened the door to find Garrison standing there, his men behind him. Bit early for social calls, Garrison. "I'm done playing games." Garrison's scarred face was hard. "Your wife's father owes me money. She's the payment he promised. I'm collecting. Jake Thornton can promise you the moon. Doesn't make it his to give." "Then I'll take it up with him." Garrison raised his voice. "Thornton, get up here and explain to your daughter her duty." Jake stumbled forward, reeking of whiskey despite the early hour. His bloodshot eyes found Mary Lou, and for a moment, something like shame flickered across his face. Then it was gone, replaced by desperate greed. "Mary Lou, girl, be reasonable. Mr. Garrison here's a wealthy man. He'll take good care of you. Like you took care of me." Mary Lou stepped around Samuel, ignoring his attempt to keep her back. "Like you took care of Mother. You sold me for a horse. Father. Now you want to sell me again for money to drink away. You're my daughter. You owe me obedience." "I owe you nothing." Her voice was steady, cold. "You gave up any claim to me the day you traded me like livestock. I'm a married woman now. A Hayes, not a Thornton." Jake's face went purple. "You ungrateful little—" He lunged forward, hand raised. Samuel's fist connected with his jaw before he could finish, sending Jake crashing into the wall. Garrison's men went for their guns, but found themselves facing not just Samuel, but Tom and Will Crawford, who'd emerged from rooms on either side of the hallway. "Everybody calm down," Sheriff Watson commanded, appearing at the top of the stairs with his shotgun. "Garrison, I told you to handle this legal." "This is legal," Garrison insisted. "I have papers." Papers Jake Thornton signed while drunk, promising something that wasn't his. The sheriff moved closer. "Judge Morrison's in town for circuit court. We'll let him sort this out, proper-like. And if I don't want to wait for some judge, then you'll be waiting in my jail instead." Watson's shotgun never wavered. "Your choice." Garrison calculated odds 5 men against Samuel, the Crawfords and the sheriff. Plus, faces were appearing in doorways all along the hall. The entire hotel was awake and watching. "Fine," he said finally. "We'll see the judge. But this isn't over." The courtroom was packed by 9 o'clock. Word had spread through Cedar Ridge like wildfire. The final chapter in the saga of Mary Lou Thornton was playing out. Some came to support, others to gossip, but all wanted to witness the drama. Judge Morrison, a stern man with silver whiskers, reviewed the papers with obvious distaste. Jake Thornton, somewhat sobered but still swaying, stood with Garrison. Samuel and Mary Lou sat at the other table, hands clasped tightly. "Let me understand this." The judge began. "Mr. Thornton, you signed a paper promising your daughter to Mr. Garrison in payment of gambling debts." "Weren't gambling debts," Jake protested. "Business loans." "For a mining claim that never produced anything but empty bottles," someone called from the gallery, earning scattered laughter. "Order," Judge Morrison commanded, "and this promise was made when, exactly, 14 months ago," Garrison supplied. "And then, Mr. Thornton, you subsequently traded your daughter to Mr. Hayes for a horse." He took advantage," Jake burst out. "I was not myself that day." "You were drunk," Murphy the bartender called out, "like every other day." "Order," the judge banged his gavel. "Mr. Hayes, you then married Miss Thornton?" "Yes, Your Honor, legal and proper, with Reverend Carlyle officiating." "I see." The judge studied the papers again. "Mr. Garrison, you claim your prior agreement takes precedence." "It does. First claims the strongest in law. In property law, perhaps. But despite Mr. Thornton's apparent beliefs, his daughter is not property." Judge Morrison's voice grew stern. "She is a person, with rights under law. Mr. Thornton, did your daughter consent to this arrangement with Mr. Garrison?" Jake shifted uncomfortably. "She don't need to consent. I'm her father." "Actually, she does." The judge leaned forward. "A woman over 18 cannot be contracted in marriage without her consent. Did you have her consent?" "She never even knew about it," Mary Lou said clearly. "The first I heard of Mr. Garrison was yesterday." "Then the contract is void." Judge Morrison set the paper aside. "Even if we accepted the premise that a father could sell his daughter, which this court does not, the contract would require the daughter's knowledge and consent to be binding." "This is outrageous," Garrison stood. "I paid good money." "Then your dispute is with Mr. Thornton for the return of that money, not with Mrs. Hayes." The judge's gavel came down hard. "Mrs. Hayes is legally married and not subject to any prior claims." Case dismissed. The courtroom erupted. Mary Lou sagged against Samuel in relief, but Garrison wasn't finished. His face dark with rage. He pointed at Jake Thornton. "You cost me $500 and a year of my time, old man." "I'll pay you back," Jake whined. "Just need time." "You're out of time." It happened fast. Garrison drew his gun. Women screamed. Men dove for cover. But before Garrison could fire, Samuel was there, knocking the gun aside. The two men crashed to the floor, trading blows. Garrison's men started forward, but found themselves facing the Crawford brothers and several townsmen who'd had enough of outsiders threatening their neighbors. Sheriff Watson waded into the melee, his shotgun convincing most to settle down. Samuel and Garrison rolled across the floor, each trying for advantage. Garrison was bigger, heavier, but Samuel fought with the desperation of a man protecting everything he loved. They crashed into the gallery benches, scattering observers. "Stop it!" Mary Lou cried. "Stop it, both of you!" But it was Jake Thornton who ended it. Seeing a chance while everyone was distracted, he grabbed for Garrison's fallen gun. His hands shook as he raised it, pointing it wildly. "Nobody move, I'll shoot."
"Father, no."
Mary Lou started forward. Jake swung the gun toward her, his face twisted with years of resentment and failure.
"This is your fault. All of it.
If you'd just done what you were told."
The shot was deafening in the enclosed space, but it wasn't Jake who fired.
Sheriff Watson's shotgun boomed, and Jake Thornton spun and fell, the pistol flying from his hand. He hit the floor hard, blood spreading from his shoulder. In the sudden silence, Mary Lou stood frozen, staring at the man who'd given her life and nearly taken it. Then Samuel was there, pulling her against him, shielding her from the sight.
"It's over," he murmured. "It's all over."
Garrison, subdued now with Watson's shotgun aimed at his head, raised his hands. "I'm done. We're leaving." "After you pay damages for disrupting my court," Judge Morrison said coldly. "And assault charges. Sheriff, lock him up until he can pay fines or serve time." As Garrison and his men were led away, Doc Pritchard knelt beside Jake Thornton. "Shoulder wound. He'll live if infection doesn't set in." Mary Lou looked down at her father, this broken man who'd caused so much pain. Samuel's arm tightened around her. "You don't have to," he began.
"Yes, I do."
She knelt beside Jake, whose eyes fluttered open.
"Father."
"Mary Lou." His voice was weak, confused.
Did I hurt you?"
"No," she said softly. "You can't hurt me anymore."
"I'm sorry."
The words came out slurred, but seemingly sincere.
"Your mother, she'd be so ashamed. I failed you both."
Mary Lou felt tears on her cheeks.
"Yes, you did."
"Can you forgive me?" She looked at this man who'd traded her for a horse, who'd tried to sell her again, who'd pointed a gun at her in rage. Then she looked up at Samuel, who'd fought for her, protected her, loved her. "Someday," she said finally.
"Maybe someday."
Doc Pritchard and his assistant carried Jake out on a stretcher. The crowd began to disperse. The drama ended. But as Samuel helped Mary Lou to her feet, Reverend Carlyle approached. "That was a brave thing, offering forgiveness." "I didn't forgive him," Mary Lou corrected. "I just didn't close the door on the possibility." "That's brave, too." The Reverend smiled. "You've both shown courage through this trial. Your marriage has been tested by fire and proved true." As they left the courthouse, Mary Lou noticed something had changed. The whispers followed them still, but the tone was different. Women nodded respectfully. Men touched their hats. She was no longer that Thornton girl or the one traded for a horse. She was Mrs. Hayes, who'd faced down her past with dignity. "Let's go home," Samuel said, helping her into the wagon. "Home?" She savored the word. "Yes, let's go home." As they drove out of town, Mary Lou looked back once. Cedar Ridge looked smaller somehow, less important. The opinions that had weighed so heavily seemed lighter now, dispersed like morning mist. "Any regrets?" Samuel asked. "No." She moved closer to him on the seat. "My father made his choices. I've made mine. I choose you. I choose us. I choose the life we're building together. Even though it started with a trade, how it started doesn't matter." She echoed his words from before. "Only how we continue." Samuel pulled the wagon to a stop on the rise overlooking their ranch. The house stood solid and welcoming, smoke rising from the chimney where Tom had already started a fire. The garden showed green with promise. Cattle grazed peacefully in the distance. "Welcome home, Mrs. Hayes," Samuel said softly. "Thank you, Mr. Hayes." She smiled up at him. "For everything." He kissed her there on the wagon seat, with the whole of their life spread before them. Behind them lay trading posts and whiskey-soaked bargains, judgment and violence. Ahead lay seasons of planting and harvest, children's laughter filling empty rooms, years of love deepening like good wine. The girl traded for a horse was gone forever. In her place sat a woman who'd claimed her own worth, fought for her own future, and won the greatest prize of all, a love that saw her true value when the rest of the world saw only scandal. As they drove down toward home, Mary Lou felt the last chains of her past fall away. She was free. She was loved. She was exactly where she belonged. 1 year later, the Hayes Ranch hummed with new life. Mary Lou stood in her expanded garden, hands resting on her swollen belly, watching the sunset paint the Texas sky in shades of gold and crimson. The wildflowers she'd planted around the house swayed in the evening breeze, their bright colors a defiant celebration against the harsh landscape. "You shouldn't be on your feet so long," Samuel called from the porch, his voice carrying that note of protective concern that had only grown stronger since they learned about the baby. "Doc Pritchard said exercise is good for me," she replied, but she moved toward him anyway, one hand supporting her back. Besides, the tomatoes needed tending. He met her halfway, his arms sliding around her waist to support her, his hand splayed protectively over her belly, feeling the flutter of movement within. "Active tonight?" he murmured with wonder, even after months. The miracle of new life growing inside her still awed him. "Always is at sunset. I think she likes it when I'm in the garden." "She," Samuel raised an eyebrow. "Or he?" Mary Lou smiled. "Either way, this child will know they were wanted, chosen, loved from the very beginning." They stood together watching the sun sink lower, and Mary Lou reflected on how much had changed. The house that had once echoed with emptiness now rang with laughter and life. The Crawford brothers still worked the ranch, but they'd been joined by 2 more hands young men who treated Mary Lou with careful respect. Having heard the story of how fiercely Samuel protected what was his, the town's attitude had shifted too. The dramatic confrontation in the courthouse had become local legend, told and retold in Murphy's saloon. Mary Lou was no longer the girl traded for a horse, but the woman who'd stood up to those who tried to claim her, who'd chosen love over fear, dignity over shame. Even Jake Thornton had changed, though that transformation had been hardest to witness. After recovering from his wound, he'd been sentenced to 60 days in jail for disturbing the peace and threatening assault. Mary Lou had visited him once, near the end of his sentence. "I got a letter," he told her through the bars, his hands trembling but sober. "From your mother's sister in Missouri. Says if I can stay off the bottle, she'll give me work on her farm." "That's good, Father." "And I'm gonna try. Mary Lou. I swear I am. Maybe when I'm settled, doing better, you might write me. Tell me about the baby." She'd promised to think about it, and she had. Last week, she'd sent a brief letter to Missouri, telling him he would be a grandfather come fall. His response had been short, but tear-stained. "Tell the little one their grandpa's trying to be better." "Where'd you go?" Samuel asked, feeling her distant mood. "Just thinking about journeys," she said. "How far we've all come. Some further than others." He kissed the top of her head. "Come on, supper's ready, and I made your favorite." The kitchen was warm and inviting. Curtains she'd sewn framing windows that looked out over their land. As they ate, Samuel told her about his day, a good price for the cattle he'd sold, plans for expanding the barn before winter, Tom's announcement that he was sweet on the schoolteacher. "Miss Catherine Ellis." Mary Lou's eyes lit up. "She's lovely, and smart too. Good for Tom." "If he can work up the nerve to court her proper?" Samuel shook his head. "Man can face down outlaws, but turns into jelly around a pretty schoolmarm. You weren't exactly smooth yourself, as I recall. You can gather your things wasn't the most romantic first conversation." "I was trying to be respectful." "You were terrified," she corrected with a laugh. "Admit it, big, tough Samuel Hayes, scared of one small woman." "Still am," he admitted, catching her hand. "Scared every day that I'll wake up and find this was all a dream." That you'll realize you could do so much better than a worn-out rancher who bought you for a horse. Samuel Hayes. Her voice was firm. You didn't buy me. You saved me. You gave me choice when I had none. You showed me respect when the world showed me shame. You loved me when I didn't even love myself. Mary Lou. I'm not finished. She squeezed his hand. Yes, our story started in an ugly place, but look what we've built from it. This home, this life, this child. We took something meant for harm and transformed it into something beautiful. A knock at the door interrupted them. Samuel answered it to find Will Crawford hat in hand. Sorry to disturb supper, boss, but there's a wagon coming. Looks like travelers in trouble. Samuel grabbed his rifle out of habit. But when they reached the porch, Mary Lou gasped. The wagon limping into their yard held a young couple. The woman, clearly pregnant. The man supporting a bandaged arm. Please, the man called. We don't mean trouble. Our wagon broke an axle. And my wife, the baby's coming. Is there a doctor nearby? 5 miles to town, Samuel said, but he was already moving to help. Too far in your condition, Mary Lou. Bring her inside, Mary Lou commanded, her own condition forgotten in the face of someone else's need. Samuel, ride for Doc Pritchard. Will, help the man with their wagon. The next hours blurred together. The woman, hardly more than a girl named Sarah, labored bravely while Mary Lou did what she could to help. Her husband James paced despite his injured arm, telling their story in nervous bursts, heading west for California, attacked by bandits, lost almost everything but each other. Folks said to avoid the Hayes Ranch. He admitted shamefully. Said there was scandal here, but we had nowhere else to turn. Folks say a lot of things, Mary Lou replied calmly, wiping Sarah's forehead. Doesn't make them true. Doc Pritchard arrived just as things grew urgent. Samuel close behind, with practiced efficiency. The doctor took charge, but he nodded approvingly at Mary Lou's preparations. You've done well. Ever consider midwifing? I might, once my own is born. Sarah's son arrived just before dawn, his cries strong and healthy, as the new parents marveled at their child. Mary Lou stood with Samuel on the porch, both thinking of their own coming joy. We'll need to help them, she said. They've lost so much. Already figured we could use another hand. Samuel agreed. That James seems able enough, even with a hurt arm. They can stay in the old foreman's cabin until they're back on their feet. Mary Lou smiled up at him. Rebecca would be proud of what you've become, the man you've let yourself be. She'd be proud of you too, taking in strays, just like she did. He pulled her close. Must be something about this house that attracts folks who need shelter. Must be something about the man who owns it, she corrected, who sees beyond surface to soul. As the sun rose over the ranch, painting everything in soft pastels, they watched their domain come alive. Tom Crawford was already working with the horses, whistling cheerfully. He had indeed begun courting Miss Ellis, much to everyone's delight. Will emerged from the bunkhouse with the 2 newer hands, ready for the day's work. From the cabin, they could hear the thin cry of a newborn, another life beginning its journey. A year ago, Mary Lou mused, I was nobody, just Jake Thornton's throwaway daughter. You were never nobody, Samuel said firmly. Just took a while for everyone else to see what I saw from the start. And what was that? He turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. A woman of strength disguised as softness, a heart that refused to break no matter how it was bent, beauty that ran soul deep, everything I needed and never knew to look for. Silver-tongued devil, she accused, but her eyes were bright with tears. Learned from the best. You should hear the stories Will tells about you in town now. Mary Lou Hayes, who tamed the wilderness and the wild rancher too. I didn't tame anything, she protested. Just loved it into blooming. Like her garden, she thought, looking at the riots of color surrounding their home. What had been barren was now lush. What had been empty was now full. What had been broken was now whole. 3 weeks later, as autumn touched the land with cool fingers, Mary Lou's labor began. Sarah, recovered now and settled in the cabin with James and little Matthew, rushed to help. The ranch wives from neighboring spreads arrived too, word having spread quickly. Samuel paced like a caged wolf until Doc Pritchard banished him to the porch with the other men. "First babies take time," the doctor said patiently. "You'll wear a groove in my floor." It was full night when the cry came, strong, indignant, very much alive. Samuel nearly tore the door off its hinges getting inside. "A daughter," Doc Pritchard announced. "Healthy and perfect." Mary Lou, exhausted but radiant, held their child with wonder. Samuel sank onto the bed beside them, one finger gently touching the baby's tiny fist. "She's beautiful," he breathed, like her mother. "What shall we call her?" Mary Lou asked. Samuel was quiet for a moment. Then, Hope Rebecca Hayes, for new beginnings and honoring the past. "Hope," Mary Lou repeated, looking down at their daughter. "Yes, that's perfect." As the baby nursed for the first time, Samuel wrapped his arms around both his girls, his whole world contained in that embrace. Outside, he could hear the ranch hands celebrating, passing a bottle of Tom's Hidden Whiskey. Tomorrow, the work would continue, cattle to tend, fences to mend, life to be lived. But tonight, in this moment, everything was perfect. The girl who'd been traded for a horse had become a woman of property and standing. The bitter widower had learned to love again. From the ashes of degradation and sorrow had grown a love story worthy of any fairy tale, made more precious by being true. "Thank you," Mary Lou whispered, not sure if she was talking to Samuel, to God, or to the universe itself. "For what?" "For seeing me, for choosing me, for proving that how something starts doesn't determine how it ends." Samuel kissed her temple, then their daughter's downy head. "You were never traded for a horse. Mary Lou, you were rescued by one, and I got the better end of that bargain by far." As Hope slept between them, tiny fist curled around her father's finger. Mary Lou knew he was right. She hadn't been traded or sold or bartered. She had been set free to find her own path, and that path had led her home. The wild roses she'd planted climbed the porch posts now, their blooms defiant against the coming winter. Like her, they'd grown strong in unlikely soil. Like her, they'd found their place to flourish. Like her, they'd proved that beauty could rise from the harshest ground, given love, patience, and the courage to reach for the sun. In the distance, a coyote called to the moon, but here in the circle of Samuel's arms, with Hope breathing softly between them, Mary Lou felt only peace. The journey from shame to joy, from property to personhood, from loneliness to love, was complete. And this, she knew, was only the beginning. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and exchange thoughts about this tale. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Wild West Night, hit that like button, and press the hype button to help more people discover these stories. Your support means everything